Welcome to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Harsha Gummagatta. Harsha is a rising second-year student in our class of 2021, and he and I recently connected via Zoom to talk about his new online event series, A Professor and a Playlist. If you're a music fan, you're going to enjoy this podcast episode. So without further ado, here's my interview with Harsha Gummagatta. Harsha, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Well, first of all, how are you doing? Where are you calling from today? And how have you been holding up now that we're all spending much more time at home?
I'm doing all right. Thank you. I'm in Charlottesville, in my apartment at Ivy Gardens, like most Darden students are. Been holding up okay. I've been here since March. I knew I had a spring break plan to go to Austin for South by Southwest. But I canceled that. I canceled a plan to Chicago. And then ever since, I've just been coped up here. But it's been all right. Go out for a run sometimes. Plenty of things to keep me busy. Some club activities, some schoolwork. But it's all right. I mean, I'm safe and sound. Touch wood, can't complain. Hopefully, a few more weeks of this, and the coast should clear up a little bit.
What are you doing to pass the times? You mentioned running and school keeping you busy. Are you watching anything, listening to anything, reading anything?
I'm watching a lot. Yeah, I mean, Netflix obviously has taken over my life in a large extent. But I'm also listening to a lot of podcasts. One of my favorite pastimes right now is throwing in a podcast and cooking some food. I think necessity is the mother of invention, because now I don't want to order food from anywhere, so I'd much rather make it myself. And so I just toss a podcast in. So things like Recode Media by Peter Kafka, Recode Decode by Karas Fisher. So these are podcasts that I like. They're predominantly in the tech space, which I'm interested in, and the media space. And that's what I've been listening to.
Excellent. Well, thank you for taking time for this podcast. Maybe we'll make the rotation one evening. So for our listeners, we kind of start off these conversations at the same place. Tell us a little bit more about you and your background.
Sure. So originally from India, I grew up there. I grew up in 5 cities all across, so I speak a whole bunch of languages. Prior to coming to Darden, I worked in investment banking, and that was a fun ride. It was great. But while banking was what I was doing as a professional job, I've always had a passion for music. And on the side of my banking job, I worked at this organization called So Far Sounds, where I led a team which organized independent and intimate concerts for up-and-coming musicians. So that's something I did for the last 3 years before I came to Darden in 2019. And essentially, that I like the idea of getting people together through music. And when I thought about what I wanted to do in the future, music was something that I wanted to pivot my career around. And technology is something I've been fascinated by. I've been an engineer by trade. So I figured I'd marry the two together and learn all those business strategies from my banking job, polish them at Darden, and think of a career pivot into the music tech space. So that's what primarily brought me to Darden. This summer, I'll be heading to eBay in their business strategy role. I'll be working with the customer-to-customer marketplace team. That should be an interesting challenge to see how they navigate the current crises. But I'm sure I'll learn a lot about the music ecosystem and all of the other things that are happening in the business through my own readings as well.
So you mentioned being a big music fan. I realize this is always a hard question for music fans, but some of your favorite bands of all time, or some things that you've been listening to recently?
Ooh, favorite bands of all time. Now, I think I can answer the second question, bands that I've been listening to recently. There's one artist, he's a singer-songwriter from the UK. His name is Jordan Rakai. I think he's one of the most fabulous musicians out there. Jacob Collier, he is, again, a multi-instrumentalist, won a bunch of Grammys. I think he bagged 3 or 4 Grammys this year. And most recently, we listened to this instrumental album by these 2 musicians, Yusuf Dias and Tom Mish. The album is called What Kind of Music? and it's really cool. Yusuf Diaz is a drummer, and Tom Misch is a producer, multi instrumentalist. It's a really slick album. So that's what I've been listening to right now. All time favorites. It's too hard to answer that question.
Well, I recognize that that's a tough question for any music fan. How much time do we have? This is a relatively short podcast. So it sounds like you listen to a lot of different things. So I'm excited to dig in a little bit more later in the conversation about the I should say, I guess, event programming, and I'm not sure the best way to describe it. The Zoom event that you launched called A Professor and a Playlist. But before we get there, let's talk just a little bit more about your first year experience. What was the biggest challenge for you as a brand new student at Darden, moving to Charlottesville, getting settled? How was that experience? What was challenging about it? What was exciting about it?
Let's see. Challenging. I think the challenging bit was like moving away from a comfort zone that I'd set up for myself in India and like throwing myself in a lot of this uncertainty. But I guess that's what Darden prepares you for also. So I kind of enjoyed that. And so like segueing into what I enjoyed the most is obviously core was great. I really loved being in class. And I mean, I'm pretty sure most folks who spent their first year would say the same thing. I think what I like the most is the class discussions. It sounds like a cliche and everybody says the case method, and I can't believe I'm saying this as well. But there is something to it that boosts your confidence in the way you can talk, the way you can think fast and strategically. And it also helps you become a better listener, because if you don't listen properly, then you can't necessarily process and think and act fast. So I enjoyed watching that development, like in myself, from Q1 through to Q3 and like even Q4 online. I don't think the online experience would have been the same had we not had that foundation from Q1 to Q3.
What was that transition to virtual classes like? I recognize that it's a pretty big pivot for those of you who had only known in-person classes. How was that experience? What was it like?
So the online experience, truth be told, like obviously a lot of us didn't know what we were signing up for, but I will say that the kind of effort and the kind of quality that I saw, and we're almost at the end of Q4 now, it blew my expectations away. Like I thoroughly enjoyed it. There are certain aspects of hosting a class online which I felt were even better maybe than hosting a class in person. Some of the things like I could give as an example, like sharing a screen and like going through an Excel sheet in our valuations class, or having different votes and polls so that people can have a pulse check on different opinions. The concept of breakout rooms, which is really useful in my negotiations class and in my idea class. So this was really, I mean, this was something that was possible only because of technology. So I see the merits of it. I'd be curious to see how that gets reflected in the ongoing curriculum in the future, because there's a lot of things that can be embedded within an in-person experience as well.
So it sounds like things went pretty well. How did your faculty manage those classes? We've had Joanne Meyer, who leads Darden's distance learning team on the podcast. We've had students I interviewed for the podcast about the experience, and they've all kind of reported this incredible faculty engagement and really faculty asking for feedback and really involving students in thinking about how best to deliver those virtual classes. Was that your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think feedback is definitely still a part of how Darden runs its program. I think that there's no denying that. But I think the one thing that really struck me was in one of the first classes that I had, and this was again valuations. So in a departure from like the blackboard, the professor is using slides now, and so one of the students asked a question at the end of like a brief discussion on one particular topic, and the professor, instead of answering that question, literally slides up into his next slide, and that was the title of the next slide. And so it just made me realize that the professor had preempted that flow in the conversation and had that ready. And it just showed that there was a lot of thought put in and a lot of effort put in making that switch from an in-person class to an online class. And at that point, I was like, all right, this should be good. I need to stay positive and optimistic, and it's been great so far.
We've heard a lot here on the podcast about section pride. I'm curious, what first year section were you in?
Section D, best section, of course. We had a fantastic time. We were quite loud, but when it comes to competitions, we make our presence felt. We don't like talk too much about showing. We just show up and win things. That's what we do. Section A did win, so congrats to them. But I think it would have been a little close to the finish line if we had a few more events gone to regular programming. But yeah, Section D for life.
How did Section D fare in the virtual version of the Darden Cup? Did y'all do okay?
I think we did fine. I frankly don't remember which position we came in, but it doesn't really matter. We had good fun showing up. Like, I know we had the Section D Strava group going on. I went for a couple of runs myself. I know a couple of friends of mine ran half marathons and even biked like 18 miles or something like that. So it was good fun. It brought a lot of people together, even despite what's happening. So I think overall it was really fun.
So we had the Darden Student Association on the podcast to talk about some of the things DSA and students generally are doing to help maintain community during this time of social and physical distancing. And I should say that Megan Bailey was good to point out that it's just physical distancing because really socially, Darden students are still really engaged with each other. We talked about virtual Darden Cup, and she mentioned a professor and a playlist. And I was like, what is this idea? This is incredible. And she said, oh, it's this thing where a student has been organizing a professor to come on and share, songs that are meaningful to them via Zoom. And it put us in touch, Harsha. And next thing you know, you're on the podcast. So tell us a little bit more about this idea. Where did it come from? How did you get started with it?
Yeah, so I think the idea again comes from like something I said at the start, right? Like I just like bringing people together through music. It's just something that I've done in the past, and like it's something that's worked. So one of the original versions of the idea was that given all of us were locked up in our apartments or physically distancing, it would have been fun to have a Darden internal radio almost, so that people could have regular communication, make announcements, and just have fun. I ran into logistical and technical issues there, and so I was thinking about how to execute this. Looked at another app called Stationhead, which is available only on iOS, so that would have been inclusive for all users. And then finally, I think one of the classes, one of the professors shared a YouTube video. And I could hear the sound, and it just immediately occurred to me that I could just do the same thing, but except share my Spotify sound through Zoom. And then, so that's when I figured that technically it was still possible. And from a tactical, logistical standpoint, I could have maybe gone on and like set up an hour on everyone's calendar and shared my music, or I could have made something more fun and personal out of it. And so decided to involve professors, and I thought that would be a fun way to engage the whole community, and more people would probably be interested in that too. So reached out to Professor Shane DeColi. He taught us accounting. It was one of the most memorable classes that we've had so far in the first year, Section D. And he was immediately on board, and it was a fantastic episode. Shane started off that Wednesday with sharing some of his most memorable songs, a lot of which were Australian songs that meant a lot to him, and he shared these beautiful stories around them. I think there was one song in particular that his daughter had recommended to him, so there was a lot of personal elements that he shared, and it was a great turnout, and people really enjoyed that. That's how that idea was born. I know this is a long answer, but that's how things started.
And so who have you had on the show, so to speak?
So after Shane, I've had Professor Ed Freeman on the second episode. He went old school with some beautiful old Allman Brothers songs and some Miles Davis, some Aretha Franklin, just fantastic songs. After that, we had Lalila Lanik. She shared some incredible Turkish music. And then she had like this beautiful one theme. It was just beautiful moments through her entire life. And in order to complement the story that she was narrating through her music, she also made like a slideshow with some photos of her family and her loved ones and her friends. And almost each song had a certain memory associated with it, and she could share that with the listeners through that photograph. So we had Laleen week 3. Last week we had Professor Mark Modica. He's just a fantastic storyteller, and he's also a musician. Ed Freeman and Mark Lipson play in the band, I think. And so he was really keen on explaining the story of blues and how he was introduced to the blues and what it meant to him through that 1 hour playlist. And it was great. It was just like an educational storytelling extravaganza through some beautiful, beautiful blues music. So that was until week 4. This week's going to be week 5. As of now, we have a show lined up tomorrow with Professor Frank Warnock. So I was listening to his playlist just before this. It's also a really fun mix of different artists. I don't know when people will be tuning into this, but it's got like classics like Bruce Springsteen in there. There was let's see, there was a few more that I can't remember right now, but it was a fun playlist. Paul Simon was in there, the Beatles were in there. Yeah. So that's week 5. I hope to continue this over the summer, but let's see.
Well, I put in a quick plug for our dean, Scott Beardsley. When he came on the podcast last week, he talked about the music he's been listening to. You probably know this, Harsha. Scott is a really big music fan, and we started that conversation off by asking what he was listening, reading, watching, and he went through a whole list of albums that he's been spending. So you're going to have to get him on this for sure.
I think I will. I think I might just do that.
Well, it's quite a VIP roster that you've had early on. Very strong start to this. Any surprises I recognize you've had, 4 or 5 guests at this point, and I'm sure there are plenty of stories to go around, but any surprises over these first few weeks of running the show?
Surprises. Let's see. I think surprises from 2 fronts. One, I don't know if it's a surprise. I was pleasantly surprised by how willing the faculty were to jump on board. Like every time I've emailed them, I was taught by Shane, so I knew him from before. But Ed, for example, I didn't take his class in core. But I just shot him an email and he was quick to respond and he was willing to jump on. So I was really surprised by that, and I was pleasantly surprised and really happy. So that was from the faculty side. And same with Laleen. I hadn't been taught by her. She taught marketing in core. But yeah, it was just great. I just had to shoot them emails and I'd get a response. So that was fantastic. From the student side, I think I was pleasantly surprised to see how well they took like this entire diverse array of music. Maybe there was a part of me that was a little apprehensive, wondering if people would like it, people might not like it. But I've gotten so many requests asking me to share the playlist. And what I do is I keep the current week's playlist secret until the episode actually rolls out. And then people ping me and ask me to update the playlist with the most recent Professor songs. And so I've been surprised by that, and it's great. I'm glad that people like the songs, and I'm glad that people are listening in.
So I've got to ask you now, for our listeners who are like, man, this sounds really, really cool. I want to hear what the professors have picked out. Can you find the past playlists out there on Spotify?
Yes. So if you go to Spotify and type a professor and a playlist, I think there's only one playlist by that name, and you'll find all of the songs that the last 4 episodes have had so far. And just so that I can add there. When I asked the professors to send me their favorite songs, because this was an hour-long program, I asked them to pick about 8 to 12 songs, and I would cut them like 3/4 of the way. But as I discovered, it's really hard for people to pick only 8 to 12 songs. And so I had like people sending me, Ed sent me 30 plus songs. Shane sent me about 14. Frank has sent me about 17. So there's way more songs in there than we actually went through on the episode. So there's more music there.
So it's interesting to hear you say that you thought about starting a radio station or wanted to start a radio station. I mentioned that just because so few people listen to the radio outside of being in their car, or might listen to NPR in their house. But radio is kind of gone through this struggle over the past few years. Have you always been a radio person, though? I asked this question in the interest of full disclosure, as someone who is a radio fan, a college radio DJ for a very long time. Love radio, but I feel a little bit of an anachronism in saying that out loud.
I don't think there's anything wrong in like being a radio person. Honestly, that's where the music first began. But I think for me, it was not the traditional idea of a radio. It was more the concept of it. It would have been more like internet radio, and it was just like given the current times. I didn't think that people wanted to sit in front of a screen once again and like stare at a Zoom call. And I thought, what would people want that they could just play in the background while making some food or cutting vegetables or whatever they were doing, or working out for that matter. And I thought radio was just most passive form of entertainment that there could be, and that's what I thought I'd start with. And so even on the Zoom call, I encourage people to just tune in as if they were listening to a radio show. It's not necessary that people have to have the video on, and there's nothing really happening there. It's all about listening to the story and listening to the music.
That's a really nice idea. Have you thought about turning this into a regular podcast, or have you thought about continuing this in a world in which we're able to be in person again? Do you think that this is something that you'll continue to do?
I have thought about it, and it's something that I definitely want to continue. I like doing it because there's so much music I get to discover, and so many people are just happy because of it. So why not? I'd want to try to continue it over the summer, and I think going into next year, it'll be a great way for even incoming students to get to know their professors outside of class. And maybe some professors who might not even teach them. This was actually something that Mark suggested to me. He said that something like this would be nice to have even next year when we're trying to build a community amidst all of the uncertainty that's there. So I definitely want to do it. And even if it's in person, maybe we could just record it or figure out other logistical ways to do it. But I'd love to continue with this. There's so many professors I have to get through. Only on episode 5 tomorrow. So this is a long way to go.
No, absolutely. And I think I can imagine many of our incoming students, or anybody who's had these professors, right? I'm thinking about alumni too, would be interested in the content, just getting to hear from their professors, something that's meaningful, important to them. I imagine one of the reasons why some of these songs resonate, similar to what you shared about Shane DeColey, is that there's personal meaning to these songs and a personal story behind them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's basically what I want to get out of it. I think Mark was asking me the same question. He was asking me if will students be interested to know the story of blues, and at which point we were discussing that, and we just thought if that is really personal to you as a professor, then that's something that they want to know. And so it could be any story. At that point in time, it could be something that they just said, they thought about from their childhood, that could just be so meaningful for the students. So yeah, there's a lot to be learned outside the classroom also. So why not?
Do you ever imagine what you would do if the tables were flipped? If it was a professor and you and a professor was asking you what songs you would pick? Do you know what would go on that playlist?
Oh, I play a lot of. I mean, firstly, I'd love for that to happen. Secondly, I play a lot of great Indian independent music. There's just so much talent that I saw there when I was working there that I think the whole world should be listening to. And one of the things that me and some of my friends who are musicians used to joke about was I used to keep saying that, man, India isn't the market for us. The world is the market. We need to get our music out there. And so, yeah, if I got the chance to share music, I'd be sharing that because the other stuff I'm sure everyone's heard of and like it's gotten its due listenership. But I'd much rather get like up and coming musicians from all across the world, India specifically, because that's what I know. But the more I find out, the more I back up and coming musicians.
So we've got prospective students who listen to this podcast, and people who are coming in our class of 2022. I'm gonna ask you two questions here, Harsha. For the people who are just beginning their MBA research process and just starting to think about pursuing an MBA, what's a piece of advice you might share with people who are early in that process?
So for people who are looking at an MBA early in, my advice would be to really think about why they want to do an MBA to begin with. Like it depends on which stage of career they are in, what their aspirations are. All of that is, I think, aspirations are secondary. I think firstly why they want to do that and where they want to get to post the MBA. And I think the second thing that people should be looking for is what sort of experience do they want. As an international student, I was obviously thinking of MBAs, and I could have thought of options in India or other countries. But I wanted an experience that was heavy on community, and I wanted an experience where I wanted to learn a lot, and that's something that went into my decision-making process. So if people have clarity on why they want to do it and what they want to get out of it, to these granular levels, then I think that's something that they should start with.
And that's a great piece of advice. It sounds like even during this time when people are remote and online together and these kinds of things, that you're still very much feeling that community. I mean, if you've got professors who say, I want to come on the Zoom show you're hosting, and you've got classmates that want to listen, that's, at least to me, I think it's a pretty powerful testament.
Yeah, I mean, it's way more powerful than I anticipated. That's why I said, when you asked me what surprised me, like I knew that you could reach a professor when you wanted to, and it was always an open door policy. But this pleasantly surprised me, and it was wonderful to see this happen. And also, as Section D, we have happy hours, and professors usually jump in on that as well, and like just have a casual chat with all students. So it's great. Like it's really organic. Like I don't think that this is something that's being forced. It's just second nature. And I think people just come to expect it now, that this works.
And the last question I'll ask you is, for our incoming students, class of 2022, what's one piece of advice you might share with them?
Wow, these are big words. I hope I need to be very wise here. I think the one piece of advice that I tell them is just, this is going to be cliched, but truly be yourself and don't lose track of what you come to Darden to do. There's a lot going on at Darden. There's so many things to do, and you have, as we've all been told 100 times, to trust the process. But the important thing is to not lose who you are and what you came here to do amidst all that happens. Because ultimately, like I said, when you started to think of why you want to do an MBA, you had a certain vision in mind. And yes, it's great to be malleable and like move with the times, but it's also important, it's also important to know what you came here to be and who you are really. Those were like wise words by me, but I don't know. That's what I feel right now.
No, I think that's great advice. It certainly resonates. We've had some career development folks on the podcast recently. They've shared similar things, right? To run your own race and remember why you're here and what your motivations are. It's very easy to get swept up in all the things that are happening. And so the more you can focus on you and your motivations and your goals, I think that can be really helpful, particularly during a very busy first year when you feel like you're pulled in a million directions.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Exactly. I think, yeah, you summed it up really well. I can't even add anything more to that. I wish I had your answer as opposed to saying what I said. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, Harsha, I have the benefit of getting to hear people talk about Darden pretty regularly here on the podcast, so I might have a little bit more practice when it comes to that question. Also, I got to ask the question, so a little bit of an unfair advantage. So, well, Harsha, it's been great spending time with you today, and so awesome to hear about what you're doing to kind of help foster community during this time. From one music fan to another, thank you for coming on the podcast and for running a professor in a playlist. And hopefully all our listeners tuning in here will go off to Spotify and type that out and type that in the search box and listen to what some of our faculty members have been recommending.
It's been a pleasure of mine. Like when this came up, I was so happy. I was like, why not? This is a great opportunity for me to share this. And I'm happy if it just brings more people to listen into a community. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
And that was my conversation with Harsha Gummagatta, a rising second-year student in our class of 2021. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. And until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.